Dá pra ver, né? Oh, desculpa. Aí já não garanto. Yeah. Okay. Good evening. Thank you very much for being here. We're going to be talking about Spiritist literature tonight. So we're going to be talking about some of the books, the basic books of Spiritism, but not only that. I guess the message that I wanted to prepare is more related to how can we learn to evaluate the books that we read, how to choose the material that falls in our hands, and also the importance of having a critical eye whenever we read something, and we have to think about it. It might be something new to us. So what are the things that we can do to help us become better students of Spiritism? So this is more or less what I wanted to talk about. So, do you remember Harry Potter? Elias is like, Harry Potter is not Spiritist. I know. Just bear with me. So, back in the day, when everybody was interested in Harry Potter, was pure madness, right? And whenever there was a new book coming out, people would camp out in front of the bookstore to, waiting for the book, and online discussions about what each character is going to do, so on and so forth. And that motivated a lot of smart people to try to make a lot of money. Okay, so they would leak. Somebody at the print shop would get a copy and leak the book online, and obviously for a small fee. And there were also fake Harry Potter books, like a book that somebody would write somewhere, just using the name of the characters and the whole Harry Potter universe, but a book that had nothing to do with the original work. And they would sell it like, I don't know, Harry Potter against the Chinese dragon, that doesn't exist, but people would sell it, to make a quick buck. And it had no literary quality. It had nothing to do with the original work, so on and so forth. So why am I talking about Harry Potter? Just to illustrate something, that situation that also happens with the Spiritists in the Spiritist literature. We are not immune to this type of falsifications, of fake works. And there are smart people everywhere, whether it's popular culture and also religion, science, and everything. Everybody, a lot of people trying to make easy money, who have been targeting the Spiritist literature, but without any compromise to the very solid, very rigorous principles of our doctrine. So for many years, mainly in Brazil, not as much here, although here in the United States we probably have the same situation, more related to spiritualist works, not Spiritist necessarily. But we have seen the market being flooded by bad books. I don't know how else to put it, but works that are allegedly Spiritist, but in actuality have nothing to add, nothing to contribute to the original body of knowledge that we call Spiritism, like the basic knowledge of Spiritism. Books that try to pass absurd ideas, sometimes bizarre ideas, as something that is Spiritism. And we know it's not, but a lot of people don't. So, like Raul Teixeira, the medium and author that a lot of people know, he said once in a lecture that he was giving about a similar subject, he was saying that, you know, the self-serving people, you know, the smart people, not the smart people, the smart people, the people who are interested in financial gains and all that kind of stuff, they are always very aggressive, you know. They will call the Spiritist Center, they will offer to go there and give a lecture so they can peddle their material. They will promote their books with the Spiritist Federation somewhere. They will try to sell it at the bookstores. They are unrelenting. And on the other end, people like, I guess, normal people like us, we are always very shy, too afraid of criticizing, and too afraid of not being, you know, we're not being humble if we criticize that book. And as a result, our opinion is never heard. And those aggressive people, they keep selling their stuff, right? And what happens is that a lot of those people, a lot of the smart people, they realize that terms like a Spiritist novel or dictated by spirit of so-and-so, when it's written on the cover of a book, that attracts a lot of attention. That helps sell their material. The potential reader, including Spiritist readers, they see that stuff, you know, book by spirit of such and such, or a Spiritist novel, and they, in their minds, that is a seal of approval, that the book is good. I mean, how can it not be, right? It says there that it was written by a spirit, was dictated by a spirit, it was bought at the Spiritist Center sometimes, it was perhaps promoted by a Spiritist Federation. So how can it not be good? So people buy it, people read it, they don't question everything that they are reading, and they start spreading the news out there. So all of a sudden, we start seeing all these weird, strange ideas, you know, for those of us who try to study the basics, and we see those things that are, we know that don't belong to Spiritism, and all of a sudden, it's being discussed everywhere, at the center, when somebody asks you a question on the street, you know, somebody who knows that you're a Spiritist. So, knowing that this problem exists, what are the things that we as Spiritists, as students of Spiritism, how can we ensure that the Spiritist principles are not misrepresented out there? I think when I was preparing this, the first thing that occurred to me is that we have to ask ourselves, are we really, truly good students of Spiritism? Do we know the basic works? Do we make an effort to pick up a book and read and make notes and discuss with, you know, people at the center or online or whatever it is that we have access to? Or are we that kind of Spiritist who picks up the gospel once in a while, you know, mainly when we're going through some problems, some rough times, and we open it at random and, oh, let's see what the spirits have to tell me here. Oh, it fits me perfectly. Nothing wrong with that, but if this is all we are doing, we are not serious about understanding and studying our doctrine. Some people also think that because maybe you read Kardec once before, maybe the Spirit's book or maybe the Medium's book, you already read it once, that's enough, you already understand it. Besides, everything was written in the 19th century, that's all old stuff, we need new stuff, right? I've heard that before. You know, Spiritism is we need new material. We need something new in our doctrine. If we think like that, then we're in a good place, because new, novelty, new stuff is what we can find the most in this flood of books that hit the market that have nothing to do with Spiritism, unfortunately. So I guess the challenge here is how do we know if one of these new ideas, something that we read and just learn about, how do we know if it's positive or not? How do we know if it's going to fit the principles of our doctrine or not? How can we do that, though, if we don't know the basics, if we don't care about learning the very basic? That becomes very difficult. And I guess it's normal that we are interested in what's new and what's exciting. I'm sure that it's a lot more fun to read about things like the end of the world and spiritual transition and maybe spiritual gossip, like whose spirit is somebody else, some other spirit's reincarnation. There's a lot of that stuff going on. That's fun, right? Like Spiritist TMZ, like that show on TV. Whereas if you pick up the gospel or maybe you pick the medium's book, that requires a lot more effort, a lot more attention. It is dual at times to go through that. But if we don't do it, we're not going to have the tools to question all the other stuff that is popping up everywhere. We are not going to ask ourselves, how does that affect me? How does that contribute to my progress? How does that help me know myself and let go of my, all the bad stuff that I have within? If we don't ask those questions, we will automatically migrate to that kind of easier reading, more superficial, which is often at odds with the basic principles laid out by Kardec, the basic principles of our doctrine. And talking about boring stuff, about dual stuff, there is a concept within Spiritism that we call it purity of principles. In Portuguese, we call it pureza doutrinária, which is the idea that something must be in line with the original concept, in this case, the original concept of Spiritism, the way that Kardec brought to us. And purity of principles, therefore, would be something that we have to analyze against the works of Kardec to see if it fits or if it doesn't. So a lot of people within the Spiritist movement, they don't like to talk about it. They sometimes they make make faces at that idea of purity of principles, because they think that if we are too concerned about that, then we'll always remain stuck. We're never going to achieve something in addition to what Kardec gave us, which is not true, because every single science enforces their purity of principles rules. You cannot, for instance, be some sort of scientist out there and just invent a new theory and expect that that theory is going to be immediately accepted within the environment that you are of your science. Before that can happen, your theory needs to be tested, it needs to be analyzed, it needs to be compared, it needs to be reviewed by your peers before it can be even considered plausible, right? So there is no reason why in Spiritism that shouldn't also apply. And it is true that like any science, Spiritism also has a very progressive character. We don't know everything. Kardec didn't give the Spiritist doctrine ready for us. There are other ideas, things that will and are being added. But before that happens, all those new concepts, first they must pass through a reasonable analysis, and if possible, experimentation to make sure that it fits our purpose as spiritists. In the Book of Mediums, item 230, the spirit of Erastus tells us that it's better to deny 10 true facts than to admit a single false one. And also in the introduction to the Gospel according to Spiritism, and I'm going to read it here, it says that there is only one guarantee to the teachings of spirits: the agreement between their spontaneous revelations through a large number of different mediums, not known to each other, in different locations. This is exactly how Kardec came up with his works. He didn't rely on one medium. He had his group of mediums, but he would always check that information against things that were going on around the entire world, to make sure that that information is shared among other people, to make sure that it's not just somebody's personal opinion. And this method is the only thing that is going to guarantee that Spiritism in its core will remain wholesome to the principles, without admitting this theories that are contradictory or even against our principles. We have also to keep in mind that guaranteeing that we're not going to admit anything that doesn't belong to Spiritism is not something that will happen automatically, because Spiritism exists to help us progress. It doesn't exist because the spirits who are not in the world need it. Spiritism doesn't need us. We need Spiritism in our lives, right? And it is also wrong to think that every spirit out there wants to evolve and become pure. There are a ton of spirits out there who are perfectly fine being the way they are, who are perfectly fine doing the things they have been doing for thousands of years. They have no interest in evolving, in progressing in that sense. So for those, they're actually not interested in the progress of humankind. Spiritism, obviously, is trying to offer a way for humankind to move ahead, to go ahead. So for them, they are more interested in creating confusion. And what is the best way to shake the solid basis of an idea other than creating confusion, spreading ideas that don't belong as if they were true, right? Once they do that, it becomes so easy to totally demolish something that has a very solid base. So that's why I think that fidelity to the basic concepts of Spiritism is important. So we can learn how to avoid those strange ideas. And another thing, that once we do that, once we start to focus more on what's important, on what's more basic, we immediately avoid wasting so much time in controversy and discussions that don't offer anything to our progress. I've seen discussions online, like pages and pages and pages, about whether or not Chico Xavier was the reincarnation of Kardec, and people get really passionate about it. Instead of discussing something that actually makes a difference in your life, why waste so much energy in that, right? It's just an example. So if we don't do that, if we don't pay attention to that, we risk becoming the kind of everything goes kind of a spiritist, that every new theory out there we're just going to assume as being true and start spreading it, and basically wasting our time and wasting an opportunity that we have to actually go ahead. Anyways, I obviously don't want to say that Spiritism is the only truth out there. We know it's not. There's a lot of other theories that are, they have their reason, they have their importance. It's just that there's a lot of stuff that simply doesn't belong to Spiritism, right? Daniel, for instance, if he wants to trim his sexy beard, he's not going to go to a cardiologist, right? He's going to go to somebody who knows how to trim beards. So the same thing, there's a lot of stuff out there that might be great, but doesn't belong in a Spiritist center. It doesn't belong in a Spiritist book. And by studying it a little better, we're going to learn how to separate that. And, what doesn't fit, what doesn't mean anything to us, we're just going to ignore it. I have read books that had maybe 20% of great things to my point of view, and the rest, this, I don't agree with this, or this doesn't make sense to me. It might be correct at some point, but I don't see a point of studying that deeper. It's just, it didn't add anything to me. Having said all that, of course, that we cannot let anybody leave here with empty hands and not knowing what to read, what should we go to, what kind of books should we check. It doesn't work, man. So to start, I don't think there is anything better or more recommendable than Kardec himself. Kardec has 5 basic books, starting with the Spirits book, written in 1857, which just describe the basic principles of Spiritism, in a question and answer format. I'm sure everybody has seen that. And then in 1861, he published the Mediums book, which is more related to the experimental aspect of Spiritism. It explains phenomena, explains what mediumship is, the different types of mediumship, and how the spirits intervene in the material and the physical world. 1864, the Gospel According to Spiritism, which we all use at home weekly, or when we're going through rough times, we want some inspiration. It's based on the Christian Gospel, the New Testament, and it explains the moral law using the example of Jesus Christ. 1865, Heaven and Hell, which is life in the spiritual world. It also makes a comparison between Spiritism and the traditional religion in terms of the fate of the spirit after we die, after we disincarnate. And that it has a part in the end that a series of reports from spirits that explain their experiences, things they see, and it's usually very different one from the others. It's quite interesting. 1868, Genesis, which talks about the formation of the world, of living things, and it also explains the miracles of the Bible, of the miracles of Jesus under a Spiritist approach. And then Kardec also published a small little book called What is Spiritism? It's like cliff notes of the Spirits book. And he also published something called the Spiritist Review, which were monthly issues between 1858 and 1869. And those are very interesting because they provide everything that the other books explain and teach, but it goes deeper. So there are issues that, for instance, you see in the Spirits book, and then if you read, for instance, between the Spirits book and the Mediums book, Kardec realized some stuff that sounds a little different in the Mediums book, but if you read the Spiritist Review, you're going to see how he got to that conclusion. So I think it's very interesting, and it's a great way to learn more about how he came up with his principles, his theories. And all of these are available in English, both paperback or online. There's no excuse not to check.
On the website too.
Yeah, we have 5 basic books over there to download.
Yeah. Then we have the complementary authors and books, like the considered classics of Spiritism. Léon Denis is a French individual. He was 27 years old when Kardec disincarnated, and he remained faithful to the works of Kardec. He's considered the philosopher of Spiritism. His books are not authored by a spirit. It's all him, obviously inspired by spirits, but he didn't use another spirit to sign his books. And he had a deep knowledge of all of Kardec's works. So some of his books that are available in English are Life and Destiny, After Death, Here and Hereafter, and he has a few more that are in Portuguese and in French and other languages. These are easily found online too. Amazon has them. Gabriel Delanne, another French. He was born to a Spiritist family. He was an engineer, physicist. His research had an emphasis on mediumship studies. I was only able to find one of his books in English, Evidence for a Future Life, and he has a bunch more in Portuguese and in French. Camille Flammarion. He was friends with Kardec. He actually gave a very beautiful speech during Kardec's funeral. It's in one of the books. I forgot which one now. He was an astronomer, researcher, and Delanne said that he was a philosopher crafted in a wise man, possessing the art of the science and the science of the art. God in Nature is a very beautiful book. I found it online once. It was weird. It was like pictures of the book. It was kind of weird to read it, but it's a very beautiful book. Imaginary World and the Real World, The Haunted Houses. Those are the narrations of the infinite and psychic problems. Those are the ones that are available in English. Hard to find, though. I'm not going to lie to you. And then there are some more outside of France, in other places, mostly in Brazil, that also contributed with research and with material. So Ernesto Bolzano is an Italian scientist. He was a positivist materialist. In other words, he didn't believe in any of that stuff about spiritism and spirits and nothing like that. In fact, he was very critical of the mediums at that time. He called everybody a fake. And he started studying spiritism, Kardec, and he felt more convinced. He published several books on his studies. None of them I was able to find in English, unfortunately. Bezerra de Menezes, he was a doctor of the poor. He spent he pretty much dedicated his entire life to helping others in Brazil. There's actually a movie about his life, very interesting. He was the first president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation. And again, unfortunately, I was not able to locate a book any of his books in English. Herculano Pires, writer, journalist, educator. He, from what I read, from what I learned, he fought a lot with Bezerra de Menezes because he was very strict in terms of what should be admitted as ideas of Spiritism or not. And he fought against a lot of ideas that he thought were not correct, that were being introduced into Spiritism back in the beginning, in the early 20s and 30s. But he does have a few books in English: Conception of God, Mediumship and Communications. Actually, those are the only two that I found. Deolinda Amorim. He researched a lot about mental illness with a Spiritist point of view. He's known for introducing Spiritist ideas within universities in Brazil. No books in English that I was able to locate. Ivone do Amaral Pereira. She was a seamstress and medium. He had more than 20 books published. A lot of them are available in English. I think we have a few here. On the Canvas of Infinity, Memoirs of a Suicide, very important book. Those are the two ones. That she had a few more in Portuguese, a lot more in Portuguese. And we have some here because I've seen. Francisco Xavier, Chico Xavier. Again, medium since childhood. He wrote more than 400 books authored by several different spirits. He has a lot of material available in English, including books such as 2,000 Years Ago, Paul and Stephen by Emmanuel. André Luiz, has that collection, Life in the Spiritual World, which is also entirely, I think there are two, from the 16 books, there are 2 or 3 that are not available in English. All the other ones are. By André Luiz, who talks about the life in the spiritual world. It's kind of like a continuation of Heaven and Hell, but with a lot more details. And he has a lot more books, obviously, in Portuguese. And Divaldo Franco, also medium since childhood, founder of the famous Mansão do Caminho in Brazil. He is very famous for his lectures, more than 50 countries. To this date, he's 90-something years old, and he's still actively working. He has more than 170 books. A lot of them are in English, including... He has this, it's called the Psychological Series, all by Joana de Angelis. And a lot of those books are translated into English. It's, for those of you who like psychology and, how the spirit, reincarnation, and things like that affect psychologically all of us. These books are phenomenal. They're very, very interesting. And additional resources. There is a bunch of stuff that we can find online, both in English and in Portuguese and other languages. If you go to the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, they have a list of books that are available for download. Same thing with the Oregon Spiritist Society. There are PDFs that are available that you can download for free. If you go to the U.S. Spiritist Federation website, they sell books online. They offer the basic works by Kardec. Everything is available online. And obviously Amazon. I was able to find a lot of stuff on Amazon, obviously that you have to buy. But a lot of it is also available on Kindle, so it's a lot cheaper. And I personally sometimes feel bad of downloading PDFs. So what I try to do, I buy a book later on, or I go to Brazil and I buy a book, and then I give to somebody or bring it here to our library, to try to keep my karma going. It's just a suggestion. But there is a lot of material that is available online. We have a great library here, bunch of titles available, mostly in Portuguese, of course, but still we do have some stuff in English. So this is what I had to show you. I hope that it's an additional tool for all of you who are interested in studying more. And sometimes we all get confronted with these weird, strange ideas. And I think it's important that we know where to go to get the information that we need in order to judge everything that we learn under a more realistic light, and knowing how to separate things that make sense to us and things that don't make sense to us, instead of just accepting everything and spreading things that might not be correct, and then creating confusion to ourselves and to the spiritist effort in general. Thank you very much for your attention, and good night, everyone.